Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy human being you, and welcome to today's true crime episode. I'm so happy that you are here. I am so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the brutal murder of 15-year-old Corriann Cervantes. On February 4th, 2014, in Houston, Texas, or more specifically in the Friendswood area of Houston, Texas, 15-year-old Corriann Cervantes left home after an argument with her father. And when she didn't come home that night, her father just figured that she was with friends and she was blowing off some steam. But the next morning, or the next day rather, when her grandmother went to school to pick her up at the end of the day, she found that Corriann was not there and had not gone to school that day. And that was an immediate cause for concern. Because Corriann, you see, she was the type of teenager who actually liked school. So getting in an argument with her father wasn't something that would make it so she would skip school the next day. That just wasn't the type of kid that she was. And then you take that and you add the fact that her family is trying to get a hold of her. Okay, they're calling her, they're texting her, they're even sending her Facebook messages, and no one has heard from her. They just know deep in their gut that something terrible has happened. And unfortunately, they would find that this was true because just days later, her body would be found in an abandoned apartment that wasn't far from her home. And what's super tragic here is that even though her family had had all of these ideas of these terrible things that could have happened to her running through their head, they were going to find that the worst things they were imagining weren't even close to what this girl actually went through. Because this little girl went through hell, and the people who did this to her were people that she thought she could trust. But before we get into all of the rest of the details of this case, I first need to tell you or ask you, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. Also, before we get into these details, I first need to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Aura. Have you ever wondered why you get so many spam emails from companies that you've never heard of, or get calls and texts from numbers that just seem a little bit off? Well, that is because there are these things out there called data brokers, and they are making billions, yes, billions with the B of dollars by selling your private information to people you don't want to have it, like scammers and marketers. Now that sounds awful, but there is good news, and that is that data brokers are legally required to remove your information if you ask them to. The problem is they make it super confusing to figure out the process on purpose, and that's one of the ways in which Aura comes in. They automatically remove your information from these types of sites, and look at how many different sites your information can be on. And I don't know who Find People Search even is, so I definitely didn't give them permission to have my personal and private information. Yet somehow they do, and Aura helps me remove it, and they help me keep it off, okay? They do the hard work, so I do not have to. And you know what? That's not all they do. Aura is all-in-one digital security. You can get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web. You can get time fraud alerts for credit and banking. You can get a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. And if anything does happen, Aura has US fraud experts ready to help 24/7. So you can get all of the online protection you could ever want or need in one place, and that is why I recommend Aura. I don't want to leave myself exposed, and I have to imagine that you don't want that either for yourself. So if all of that sounds as good to you as it does to me, make sure to click the link at the top of my description box. It's aura.com/BRATTERSTEIN. It lets them know I'm the one that sent you, and get a 14-day free trial to see whether or not your personal data has been exposed. And if it has, let Aura help you put a stop to it today. Now, I just want to say a big thank you to Aura for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Aura that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock, don't ever change. And with that, let's go ahead and get into this video. Today, I'm going to tell you the entire story of the murder of Corriann Cervantes. I read all the things so that you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through the details of this case. But of course, I want you to answer once you have something to go on, right? But the question of the day is this. Do you believe that both of the people who are responsible for Corriann's murder truly believed that in killing her, they were sacrificing their souls to the devil? Yeah. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after we go through the details of this case. And now, with all that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 15-year-old Corriann Cervantes. Corriann Cervantes Waters was one of 3 children with a brother and a sister, and she was born on April 2nd, 1998, to parents Corey and Tiffany in San Jose, California. And she was a beautiful baby who grew up to be a beautiful girl with dark hair and sparkling blue eyes. Growing up, Corriann was the type of kid who just liked to help people. She was the type of person who was there for the people she cared about. And her family said that she just had sort of like a soft heart. They said she was wonderful, she was great, she was bubbly, and she loved life. Corriann was very much a typical teenage girl, right? She loved her friends, she loved swimming, she loved going out, she loved Jim Morrison, she loved Sublime, The Doors, Rob Zombie, Lady Gaga. For movies, she loved American History X, Labyrinth, Twilight, and Little Mermaid. And she loved animals, especially cats. And she loved singing, right? She was even in the choir. And she was strangely a teenager who loved school. She went to Clear Lake High School before eventually being transferred to Clear Path Alternative School. And she went there and she was a sophomore. And I didn't mention this yet, but these schools were in Texas. I mentioned that she was born in San Jose, California. Well, that is true. And that's where she actually lived. Most of her life was in San Jose. But at this time, the time that she was killed, she was living in Texas. And lucky for her, she did have family that was in Texas. And this was good for her because she was incredibly close with her family. Corriann was born to a huge family with lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, many of whom actually shared the first initial of C, just like Corriann. And she was just the type of kid who, like I said, loved her family. Her extended family wasn't just people you see on the holidays and then go on with your lives. Her cousins were her friends. Her and her cousin, Elena or Alana, it's spelled like Alana to me, but I could be wrong there. Let's call her E. They were always together growing up. They weren't just cousins. They were best friends. They spent all their time together. They would have slumber parties together, do makeovers together, and talk boys together, and stay up late watching movies together, and spend all of their time in their grandma's pool. Their lives were very intertwined in one another. Corriann would call everyone on their birthday just to make sure they knew that they were actively important to her on the day-to-day, and her murder left a huge hole in the lives of those who loved her. And it was actually one of those family members who loved her so much that was the first one to notice that she was missing. Corriann's grandmother, her name was Catherine, another C. She would see Corriann twice a day. She would pick her up in the morning and she would drive her to school, and then she would pick her up at the end of the day from school and take her home. Now, the living situation with Corriann is a little bit unclear to me because there are conflicting reports. There are some reports that say that her parents were divorced but still living together. And then there were other reports that said that Corriann's father, this was Corey, another C, was raising her alone, that he was a single parent taking care of his daughter, which would make more sense with the grandma and doing the pickups and drop-offs and the close relationship between her and her grandmother, and also the very close relationship that Corriann had with her aunt. But truly, I'm not sure what the living situation was, and honestly, it's none of my business anyway. But anyways, the point is that Corriann's grandmother would pick her up every day from school and drive her home. And on Wednesday, February 5th, 2014, it was no different. She showed up to Corriann's school. She sat outside. She waited, and Corriann never came out. And after that, she found out that Corriann had never been to school that day at all. Basically, what had happened here is the day before, Corriann and her father had gotten into an argument. Corriann was being a teenager. She was teenaging too close to the sun, and her dad had had it, and he had grounded her, and he had told her to go to her room and spend the rest of the day in her room. So she had gone there. But later that day, her father actually left the apartment to go, I believe it was to the grocery store. And when he left, Corriann took that as an opportunity to dip. She was going to leave. And her sister told her, don't go, you're going to get in trouble, don't do it. And she was like, you know what? I'm gone. I'm leaving. Peace out. Goodbye. So she left and she went to meet up with some friends. So when her dad got home from the store and found that Corriann had left, he was definitely annoyed. he told her to stay put. And she literally was like, and she dipped. So he was annoyed, but he wasn't worried about her. This wasn't something that was concerning to him. He just figured that, again, she was rebelling. And when she still didn't come home, he was like, okay, she's obviously really pissed off, but she's going to go to school tomorrow. We'll pick her up at the end of the day and we will have a talk about this. But then now they're finding out that she never showed up at all. So as soon as Grandma found out that Corriann hadn't gone to school that day, she immediately was on the phone with Corriann's dad and told him what was going on. And immediately he was like, this isn't right, because her being mad at him and leaving for the night was one thing, but her not going to school again the next day, that was something totally different. Immediately, the whole family started trying to get a hold of her in every way that you could think of. Calling, texting, Facebook messages, every single way that you could contact a person, they were trying to contact her. And for a teenager who lived on her phone, it was very strange that they were getting no response. And not just her dad, but also her cousins, her aunts, the people she was close with. She wasn't talking to anybody. So they reported Corriann missing and searches did begin, but there was no sign of her. And they would go on having to wait for days, dude. Days before they knew what happened to this little girl. I cannot imagine days of not knowing where your kid was, of not knowing whether or not she was okay, right? And then they were going to find out that Corriann was not okay. 5 days after Corriann went missing, her body was found. It was just after 4 a.m. when on Saturday, February 8, 2014, a boy named Arturo, who lived in the Bay Apartments off of El Camino in Clear Lake, was having trouble sleeping. So he snuck out of his apartment to smoke some weed in a nearby vacant unit. This was a unit that many local youths would use as a hangout. It was a place where they could go and do things that they wouldn't want adults to catch them doing. And it was super convenient for them because it was empty and it was easily accessible. You could get in through the windows and sometimes you could just walk in through an unlocked door. This unit was on the top floor, I believe. So he climbed the stairs. He goes to the apartment. He tries the front door and he finds that it is open. So he goes in and closes the door behind him. But when he turns to face the living room area of this apartment, he sees that there's a body on the floor. This was the body of Corriann, but Arturo didn't recognize her despite the fact that he knew her. Okay, he had known her for several weeks at this point because he and she had been spending a lot of time together because they were neighbors. They lived across the street. Her apartment complex was across the street from his apartment complex, so he saw her all the time. But when he's finding her body in this apartment, she had been there for almost a week, left just on the ground of this dirty apartment. So take that, the decomposition of it all, plus what happened to her. And when he looked at her, he could not tell that this was a friend of his. He couldn't tell who this was at all. So naturally, this kid panics, right? He's a teenager and he just found a dead body. So he books it out of that apartment and he runs to a nearby unit of two brothers who he knew, which I don't know why he didn't go to his parents. Doesn't really matter. But he runs to these neighbors' houses, his two brothers, who just happen to be up there playing video games. And he is in a panic and he tells them there's a girl and she's hurt bad. He just keeps saying over and over how there's a girl who's hurt bad and needs help. So these two brothers, one of which had ex-military training, okay, and one who knew CPR, booked it into action. Arturo then leads these brothers to the vacant apartment and they go inside to see what's going on while he waits outside because he just cannot subject himself to what he just saw again. The apartment was very cold inside and pitch black because this is the middle of the night and this is a vacant apartment with no electricity. So the brothers use a flashlight to illuminate the apartment and almost immediately they see what Arturo saw. They see a form of a woman laying on the floor. So they call out to her and they get no response. So one brother gets closer to her so that they can try to feel to see if she has a pulse. But when they get closer, they see just how bad of a shape, what her condition was, okay? And when he got closer, he said that, quote, she didn't have a face. There was broken pieces of porcelain everywhere from a toilet tank lid, and there was blood on the walls. Still, he checked her pulse and he found that there was no pulse and she was ice cold. So he backed out of the apartment and he called 911. He tells the operator what he's found and he lets them know that this is definitely a dead body and describes the scene, telling them that it looked like this person had been beaten with the lid of a toilet, like the tank of a toilet, that lid, that she had been beaten with that, saying that she was lying in a bed of porcelain shards. And he also expressed disbelief that nobody had found her sooner. He says he doesn't understand how nobody on either of the units, because she's here, the unit's here, there's a unit here and there's a unit here. And he's I don't understand how nobody in either of the adjoining units heard anything, considering when you look around the unit and you look at her body, you can see that she was seriously attacked and that it would have been super noisy. And we do find out later, it was confirmed she was beaten with that tank toilet seat, the lid of the tank of the toilet, right? She was beaten with that. So that would have been incredibly loud and nobody reported hearing anything. And then days went by, but still nobody called, nobody said anything. Now, when detectives arrived on the scene, they found that this was an incredibly violent scene. There was blood everywhere, like everywhere. And they were able to tell from looking at the scene that the attack on Corriann had started in a closet. And they were able to tell this because of just one, how much blood there was in the closet. They were also able to see like void patterns and spatter and all of that. And it was sort of like a sloped closet that was under a set of stairs. So the ceiling was, like this. And they were able to see that there were marks on the ceiling of this closet that looked like somebody's bloody head or bloody hair had been snacked into it. And in addition to that, on the walls, was it the walls in the living room or was it the walls in the closet? On the walls, somewhere within this unit, there were also drawings of pentagrams and an upside down cross. Then, on the floor of the living room, just outside the closet, there was the body of this woman, this girl. At this point, they don't know it's a girl. They think it's a woman, and she's wearing a Rob Zombie shirt and a black bra. But she was nude from the waist down with a pair of pants and underwear found on the ground nearby. They were able to see that there was extensive trauma to the woman's face, and they had to call in a forensic odontologist to assist with the identification. And though they actually believed that at first that they were looking at a victim in her 30s, through dental records and x-rays, they were able to confirm that this was the body of 15-year-old Corriann Cervantes. And from there, the detectives had the hellish job of informing Corriann's family. This family who had just spent the last several days going through absolute torture, having no answers to all the questions they had. And now this was the answer. These were the answers they were going to get. Jesus, what are you supposed to do with that? When her family found out what happened to her, it was traumatizing because you learn all of these details. Everything I'm going to tell you is things that they learned. And they didn't want to believe that this was her. They wanted to remember her how she was and not have the images and the ideas of what had happened to her in their brains forever. And then, in addition to learning all these details that happened to this child that you loved, her family also had to live with the fact that the police really didn't have any suspects in this case. Because, you'd think when looking at this scene and how bad it was, and I haven't even gotten into just how bad it was. We're going to get there a little bit later. But you would think that there would have been DNA. Several different types of DNA that the police could have used. And there just wasn't. Or no, that's not true. It's not that there wasn't DNA. There wasn't usable DNA because there was just so much of Corriann's blood at this scene that any DNA they got from other people was diluted from her blood. On top of that, they weren't really getting much information from canvassing the area either. They were out there for hours talking to all the neighbors to see if anybody heard anything, to see if anybody saw anything. But not many people had much information that they were willing to give up. Some neighbors did say that they had heard something weird the Wednesday that Corriann went missing, which would have been when this was happening to her. But nobody really had any useful information that they were willing to give up, which we're going to get into that later because some people did have some information that just didn't talk. And this was very stressful for the police officers working the case, for Corriann's family, and for the community at large. This case was incredibly traumatic for so many people. Immediately, the school that Corriann had gone to brought in counseling services for any kid who may need it, because not only did they lose their peer in such a horrific way, but it was also looking like this was in some sort of satanic ritual. That was the theory that the police were working with due to what they found at the scene on the walls and what they had done to Corriann, which we're going to get into soon. There was also a candlelit vigil held in her honor where there was candles and music and so many people there to just remember her, grieve for her, and show her family support. Friends were there, members of the church and her family were there. And her family said that no one expected something like this to happen. It came out of absolutely nowhere. And it had been incredibly hard for them to understand and come to grips with what was happening, but they were doing everything in their power to just work through it and stay strong for Corriann. And, this was very difficult for them to do for a multitude of reasons. First off, hello, you're dealing with just the knowledge that somebody you love's dead in such a horrific way. And then in addition to that, things just didn't happen for them the way that they would have expected. It wasn't like you saw on TV, okay? A cop didn't come to your house and sit down with you and explain to you every bit of information about the case so that you could be prepared. They were learning updates and learning horrific things that had happened to Corriann through the news and through the media, just like everybody else. And it was enraging for them. Can you even imagine learning all the horrific details of the murder of somebody you loved secondhand? I truly can't. I truly can't. And just to shine a light on how horrific these details were that they were getting, they were learning that not only was she beaten to death, but she was stabbed dozens of times with a screwdriver. She was tortured and she was sexually assaulted. And police had no idea who did this. And lucky for them, they would find out because they were going to get a tip. And the tip was going to come from a very unlikely source. So basically what had happened here was there was a teenage girl and her name was, help me, Lord help me, Agapita. And she contacts the police rather, with some interesting information. Okay, she tells them that she had an ex-boyfriend, and this ex-boyfriend's name was Jose Reyes. He was 17 years old, and he was also the father of her child. Okay, she says that after Corriann was killed, Jose called up his sister and asked her to come to him, so for them to meet so that he could talk to her about something. So they did, right? The meeting was set up and the two did meet. And when they're sitting there, they're talking. Agapita, she is in the hallway and she is listening. And she overhears Jose telling his sister that he and his friend Victor had killed a girl during a threesome. Now, at first, she did not know what to do with this information. So she actually confronted Jose, which is very brave on her part. I was like, so what the fuck were you talking about when you said that? And he admitted it to her. He admitted to killing a girl and said he did it because somebody wanted her soul. Now, Agapita did not immediately call 911, but she didn't keep this information to herself either. So basically, she knew a cop. Okay, she had gotten into some trouble with truancy, and this cop had been lenient on her and had been nice to her, had been helping her to be like, you stay in school. He was like a good role model for her, right? So when she hears all this from Jose, she learns this from Jose, she's thinking who can I contact? Oh, that one cop who was super nice to me, helped me stay in school. He was super cool with my mom. I can trust this guy. But she doesn't have his phone number. But what she does have is a way to contact him, and that was through Facebook Messenger. So she sends him a message with this information, which what a message to receive. Because I guess what she messaged him was hey, I think I know who did that satanic murder, because by now it's all over the news. So everybody's talking about it. And she's messaging him hey, I think I know who did it. And when he receives it, he's actually at the dinner table with his family and he jumps up. He jumps up in a fright, not a fright, but in a fury, in a furry. And what is it? He's moving quickly. And everyone at the table is super confused, but they can tell that whatever this is very serious. The two then exchange phone numbers so that they can hop on a call. And once they were on the call, Agapita tells this cop everything that she overheard and everything that Jose said to her. This cop immediately calls the people in homicide or whatever and confirms that yes, there is a case that is exactly describing the kind of thing that this chick is saying. And from there, within hours, they had a warrant for Jose's arrest. And you know what? It's a good thing they did what they did when they did, because there was another person who came forward with more information, and this was Jose's brother. It seems that his brother knew what happened, and I think maybe his entire family knew what happened, because Jose's brother basically contacted the police and was like, after I saw my mother cry, I knew I had to turn my brother in. And he called police to tell them that Jose had packed his bags and he was about to dip. So he lets the police know when Jose is going to be home so they can make sure to get there at that time so that they can take him in. So they waited and they waited until they knew he was home. They waited until he had gone to bed that night. And once he was fast asleep with all of his defenses down, they bust in this house with these giant guns. They rip him out of bed and they put him in the police car. Now, surprisingly, once this guy was in custody, he was incredibly cooperative. He offered to give his DNA. He also consented to a very damning search of his cell phone in which they recovered a photo. And in this photo, it was 3 people who were determined to be Jose, Victor, and Corriann having sexual relations with one another. And this photo, they were able to tell, was taken after 10 p.m. the night that Corriann went missing. And in addition to that, in his phone, they also found a screenshot that he had taken of a news article that said, quote, "Woman's body found in vacant Clear Lake apartment." Now, and apparently, in addition to giving the cops his DNA and letting them go through his phone, he also made a series of incredibly incriminating statements, which would normally be great, exactly what you want. However, in this case, he was not Mirandized yet. So they couldn't use any of the statements he made that were basically him admitting guilt and his reasoning for why he did what he did. But one thing they could use was the fact that he mentioned his friend Victor. He said that Victor was also part of this murder, so that meant they could bring Victor in for questioning. They could actually Mirandize him and see what information they could get out of him to help build their case against both of them. So the morning after Jose Reyes was brought in and questioned, they brought in Victor Alas, A-L-A-S, Alice. He was a friend of Corriann's from school, and they sat him down and they questioned him. And though initially he denied any sort of involvement at all, didn't see her, don't know her, nothing. He eventually admitted that the night that Corriann was killed, he did see her. Not only did he see her, he had sex with her, and he was present when she was beaten and when she was mutilated. He says that he was having sex with Corriann when out of nowhere, with no provocation, Jose just started to beat her. He said that when Jose started to beat her, Corriann looked up at him and asked him, like, Victor, why are you doing that? Victor, why are you hitting me? And he was confused because he wasn't the one that was doing it. So the cop looks at him and is like, wait, so let me get this straight. You're telling me that you're there with Corriann, you're doing things with Corriann, and your friend just starts to randomly beat the girl that you're being intimate with, and you just stand by and you watch and do nothing? That's pretty cold, man, don't you think? And he just said that he was tripping and didn't know what was going on. They also pointed out that Jose was not a particularly large man. He was just a little guy, and that Victor could have probably easily overpowered him and helped Corriann. And Victor responded to this in part, and I quote, "I'm really not a fighter. I don't fight. Like, I come from Clear Lake. I'm a good person." Are you? Are you a good person, Victor? He then said that after the assault started, when Jose started to beat Corriann, he left the closet. He left the two of them alone in the closet, and he went to the living room area to get away from what was happening. Now, that was his initial story, but of course, police questioned him further, and they were able to get him to incriminate himself further. But of course, he did always try to downplay his involvement. But now, upon further pushing, he admits to doing a little bit more. He says he was having sex with Corriann in the closet. Jose started to randomly beat her without any provocation and without him knowing it was going to happen, and that Corriann started to scream. So he said that Jose told him to, like, shut that bitch up, get her to be quiet. So he took off the belt he had been wearing and wrapped it around her neck. During this interrogation, they were even able to get him. Is that a real sentence? Hello? During this interrogation, they were even able to get him to take off his belt and on an officer show them, like pantomime, but not a pantomime because there is a belt involved, show them how he choked Corriann with his belt, which I saw this footage and it's very hard to watch. And he says that he's choking her and her face starts to turn blue. So he realizes that he can't do it and he lets her go and she just starts gasping for air. So he's trying to make it seem like this wasn't his idea, this wasn't his fault, and his reasoning he's giving for choking Corriann is to sort of illustrate that, but he switches back and forth on what his reasoning is. Okay, on one hand, he's saying that Jose is telling him he has to, and, he's fearful, and he's just doing what he has to do because he doesn't know what to do. And on the other hand, he says that when Corriann starts yelling and Jose is like, get her quiet, he thinks to himself, like, I've already got charges against me. And I'm afraid of what she may say based on what's happening right now, which feels much more like he did this to silence her for self-preservation to me. But he denied taking part in any more of the attack on Corriann. And you'll have to let me know if you think that he also took part in what we're now going to talk about, because I am going to tell you what they did to Corriann, and they were able to put this together based on statements from Jose, statements from Victor, and just Corriann and the scene as a whole. And I'm going to warn you now, it's incredibly, it's like, I want to say horrific, but I feel like it's one of those words that's kind of lost meaning because of doing true crime, right? I can't think of a word in the English language that describes just how terrible what they did to this girl is. or was. And I'm going to tell you about it now. So if you want to skip ahead a little bit, I 100% understand. So we're going to start at the beginning of that night, okay? Or rather earlier that day. So the Tuesday afternoon after Corriann got in an argument with her father and she left the apartment, she went to look for some friends to kick it around with, okay? She ends up finding one friend. I believe this was a boy. I can't remember for sure, but she and this friend hang out for a little bit. They go somewhere to get a Xanax or some Xanax. I can't remember the number of Xanax that the two went on to get. But after they got this, they met up with another friend of theirs, and this was Victor Alice. It was at this time that Corriann took half of a Xanax. It was reportedly her first time ever taking one before the group of them headed to an apartment in the Bays apartment complex because they were cold. Now, this apartment was owned or rented rather by a woman named Candy. She was an older woman, I don't know, 30s, 40s. They didn't specify it. If they did, I missed it. But an older woman who would allow teenagers to come to her home to smoke, to drink, to do things that they were going to try regardless, but would have otherwise tried in a less safe area. She was giving them a safe space to do this. Now, is this right? Is this wrong? Who's to say? Well, I mean, there's an answer there, but I don't know about you, but I definitely knew of a house just like this when I was growing up. And later, the DA said of this house and this night, and I quote, "It was teenagers who probably were experimenting with things they shouldn't have experimented with. But I think we all should be the last to judge because I think we all do things as teenagers that led to us being better people. Corriann should have had the same chance." Which that I agree with. So anyways, they get there. They smoke weed. Candy smokes weed with them. She offers them liquor from her, I don't know if she had a liquor cabinet. She offers them liquor from her home. And they all drink. They all get drunk. And Corriann was noticeably the most intoxicated of everyone, likely because she also took that half of Xanax for the first time. But it got to the point that Candy looked at her and was like, "Hey, do you want to just spend the night here?" Because she knew that Corriann wasn't able to go home because Corriann had already told her she wasn't going to be going home. She said that her dad would have locked the door on her. I don't really know what the situation would have been there. It's not super relevant. The point is, Candy's like, "Hey, Corriann, do you want to spend the night here?" And initially she said yes. She ended up passing out on the couch before eventually moving to Candy's bed. But at some point in the evening, things changed. Around 9 p.m., Jose showed up to this party, this gathering of youths at Candy's house. And some reports say that he was angry. Some reports say that he was asking specifically for Corriann. What we know for sure is that he, Jose, and Victor both went into the room where Corriann had been sleeping. Okay. Candy finds out. She gets annoyed. Okay. She doesn't need two nasty little boys in her room. Actually, period. End of sentence. And in addition to that, she doesn't need two nasty little boys in her room while a girl is in there passed out. So she goes in there and she tells them that they need to get the fuck out. By this time, though, Corriann, who had been asleep, was awake. And now, where before she said she wanted to stay at Candy's, now she was saying she wanted to leave. She wanted to go to the home of a friend of hers who lived in an apartment that was in the same complex as Candy. Candy says that she asked Corriann, like, "Are you sure you want to leave?" And she said yes. That Corriann, as I said, very intoxicated, so Candy did not want her to walk over by herself. So Candy asked Corriann's friend, the one friend that she had initially met up with, if he would walk her, but his mom was there to pick him up, so he couldn't. Therefore, Jose, Victor, and another friend, this was Victor's cousin, agreed to walk Corriann over to her friend's house. The last time Candy saw Corriann is when she was leaving her apartment in the arms of these three boys because she was so intoxicated that she couldn't even walk herself. She believed that they were heading to the apartment of one of Corriann's friends, but instead they went to this vacant apartment. This apartment was on the second floor, so they had to go up 2 flights of stairs, which was quite the task with Corriann in the condition that she was in, but they made it up those stairs. They went into the apartment and they all went into this tiny closet with the sloped ceiling, with Victor's cousin thinking they were just going in there to smoke weed. But once he realized that there was going to be a sexual encounter happening in that closet, he quickly left. This left Corriann alone with Victor and Jose. Now, this next part of the case has always really frustrated me, at least, well, the whole fucking thing is very frustrating, but the way that this part was told by the prosecutor specifically really frustrated me because he said that after the cousin left, Corriann, Victor, and Jose started to have a consensual sexual encounter. And I'm like, listen, can a girl who is so intoxicated she can't walk up a flight of stairs herself really engage in a consensual sexual encounter with two boys? I don't think so, but that's what they said. But that aside, let's say it did seem like she wanted to engage in this in the beginning, or that she actually did want to engage with this in the beginning. At some point, Corriann bit down on Jose in his lower region, which definitely seems to be evidence that the situation had gone too far, or she wasn't down with that sickness anymore. And in response to her doing this, these boys attacked her. Jose started to beat her, first with his fists and then with an ashtray. And I say ashtray in quotes like this because there wasn't actually an ashtray that was recovered. It seemed like it was just like a piece of porcelain that the kids who would use this house used as an ashtray. So he's beating her with this porcelain and with his fists, while Victor takes a belt off and strangles her with it. Now that's horrible, but that's not all they did. The two then took the rods off the window blinds and proceeded to beat her with them. Okay, the coroner later found that there were linear marks all over her body from the beating she received while she begged for them to stop and ask them why they did this to her. And then they took one of these rods, and I'm so sorry to tell you this information, but they inserted it into her eye socket with such force that it went through 3 different bones. They then took these rods and inserted them into her so deeply that they went into her abdomen and almost made it to her chest cavity. And still, they were not done. They took a screwdriver and stabbed her over and over, hitting her jugular vein at least 4 times and piercing her carotid artery so deeply that it almost reached her spine. Okay? She had 61 puncture wounds, and that isn't even counting the 15 lacerations to her head from the beating she took that left porcelain embedded in her face. And then when all was said and done, all those things that I just described that they did to her, which she was mostly alive for all of that, they then carved an upside-down cross into her abdomen before leaving her in that apartment alone for days to be discovered. I know that was a lot to hear. It was a lot to read. And can you even imagine being a cop working this case or the prosecution? The DA said that in all of his years working, he had seen a lot of evil. He had seen a lot of crime scene photos, that this was the most brutal case he had ever come across. This was the type of case that deeply affected the individuals that had to work the scene, who had to forever live with those images in their head. This 15-year-old girl gets in a fight with her dad, leaves, and instead of being able to go and hang out with friends and bitch and blow off some steam and then go home, she ended up with these 2 monsters who took advantage of her vulnerability and murdered her. And now these cops have to sit here with these boys sitting across from them, talking to them, knowing that they did this, seeing how young they were, how brutal this was, and just be asking themselves, like, why? Why would 2 teenage boys do something so horrific? And then the answer that Jose was giving them was horrifying, because he was saying that they did this so that they could sell their souls to the devil. Now, this is something that Victor seriously denies. He says it's something that Jose made up on the fly, that he's a Christian. He's been a Christian his whole life. He wears a cross. He would never do something like that. Sell your soul to the devil? No. Murder a teenage girl? Okay. However, we do know that Jose had a fascination with the devil. After his arrest, they searched his home and found an upside-down cross, a pentagram, and 666 written and carved into items in his house. They also found similar things again on the walls at the murder scene, as I already told you. And there was that upside-down cross that was carved into Corriann's abdomen. So it was clear that that played some role here. So, Victor can deny it all he wants. And he would continue to deny it. He continues to deny it. And you know what? Actually, Jose, the boy who proclaimed that he had the devil inside of him, right? He was big on this devil bullshit. He later changes his tune and says that it wasn't the devil who did this. It wasn't the devil that made him do this. It was the drugs. He later said he had done Xanax that night, and that's what caused him to do this. And the DA later said of this, quote, "You can't divorce his strength and belief in the devil from this very evil act, because quite frankly, it's the only way I can process it, because drugs don't make you do something so brutal. It's got to be a combination of anger, drugs, and a belief that you're doing what's right in your mind." So after the two boys left that abandoned apartment, Victor threw the screwdriver that he says only Jose used in the Clear Lake Church bushes, the bushes that were outside the Clear Lake Church, a screwdriver that was later recovered by police. The two boys then went to Victor's home where they crawled through Victor's bedroom window. The thing was, Victor didn't have his own room. He shared a room with his cousin, and for whatever reason, when the boys crawled through the window, his cousin was like, yo, Jose needs to fucking dip. Like, he can't be here. He needs to leave. So he did. He was mad, but he left. The problem was he didn't have anywhere to go. He couldn't go home for whatever reason. So, bro, and this is so fucked up, okay? He went back to that abandoned apartment, went back inside and slept in that home with Corriann's dead body. The next day, he was picked up at a local grocery store by a couple of his friends. And when they picked him up, they noticed that his hand was very swollen. So they asked him what happened. And he told them. He told them what he did, but they didn't believe him. They thought he was lying. And this, bro, this is a theme. After these two killed Corriann, they went on to tell people over and over they could not keep their mouths shut. Or I say they. It was mostly Jose. Jose literally told his friends that he and Victor had attacked a girl. He said that when it was happening, she asked them like why and then tried to run. So he clotheslined her with his arm to stop her and then proceeded to beat her. Friends later said that Jose would literally laugh when recounting this. Like, he thought it was so funny. He thought it was so funny that he inserted rods inside of her until he, quote, felt her insides breaking. Now, initially, again, at first, his friends did not believe him. They thought he was just a liar. And in the beginning, when he's first telling them this, the reports of what happened to Corriann hadn't come out yet. Okay? So it wasn't that crazy that they didn't believe him, though. I think if my friends told me something that specific, I might think something about it personally. But with time, with him continuing to bring it up over and over, they started to think that it was too specific to be a lie. Like, for example, apparently Jose liked to rap. And one time, after Corriann was killed, he rapped with his friends. And I'm going to tell you now, one, the lyrics are a little bit graphic. And two, I am white. But he supposedly rapped to his friends. And I quote, "It was my first time, so my homie showed me the ropes. And we ran a train on this hoe. Then my homie grabbed a belt and started choking her. And the bitch said, 'Why you doing this?' And we told her to shut the fuck up. And then we beat her, and then she tried to run, and we grabbed her and started stabbing her. And she asked us why, and we said, 'We're helping you to sell our souls.'" And apparently, as he said this rap, the entire room felt quiet because they'd all heard him rap before, but he had never rapped quite like this. And this is especially true because all this time he's telling people that he killed a girl to sell his soul to the devil, and now his rap is reiterating the sentiment. To prove that he did this, he even showed a friend of his a photo in his phone. In this photo, you can't see who it is, but you can see that there are 3 people in the phone, that one person is having sex with the girl, and the girl has her head in somebody else's lap. And this is the same photo that later police found in Jose's phone. And just for the record, because I know I said initially nobody was talking to the police. Well, once news of what happened to Corriann started to get out, and once these kids started to put 2 and 2 together and started being questioned by police, a lot of them did come forward and told police what they heard and what they knew. The police were able to appeal to them and help them understand the gravity of what their friend had did, and all the information that they gave to police really helped them in building their case. So anyways, both Jose and Victor were arrested. They were held without bond, and they were being tried as adults. And the police had really strong cases against both boys. The evidence really was on their side. And even though they couldn't use what Jose had said, they had what Victor had said. They had what their friends had said. And they had what was on the boys' phones, which ended up being very helpful, dude, because 2 days after Corriann was killed, both Victor and Jose deleted nearly 100 messages that were sent back and forth from one to the other, and then started to message each other new things that were lies to try to cover their tracks. They wrote back and forth about how that hoe was missing, and they wrote back and forth about how it's crazy that something happened to her because the night that she was killed, they left her alone on a bench because she was just too fucked up to walk. They also wrote that they had just assumed that she'd walk home in the morning once she sobered up. They didn't think anything bad would happen to her. They sent each other articles and posts about Corriann's body being found, saying it's crazy that this happened to her. It's crazy that nobody can go out and have fun anymore. And that it's intense that they're talking about devil worshippers, because prior to this, they had no idea there were people that worship the devil in their area. It's just insane because they did all this. They sent all these messages knowing full well that they had murdered her, and they were literally doing this just to cover their tracks in case the police took their phones. Now, when Jose and Victor went to trial, they did have 2 separate trials, and Jose's went first. 10 months after Corriann was murdered, Jose, who was now 18 years old, went to trial, and he was noticeably different. He had cut his hair, he was wearing glasses, he was being quiet, he wasn't being cocky or brazen. He was really reining himself in for court. Now, because of the lack of DNA in the case, or rather the lack of usable DNA they had against Jose, in order to build the case against him, they had to bring in all of the people that he had confessed to during the time that he was free. So they brought in all of his friends, every single person that he thought he could trust, his friends, his family members. They all sat in front of him and testified against him. They literally put his own sister on the stand, dude, and she cried and she hesitated when she looked him in the eye, but she told the court what he had told her, and she told them information that she couldn't have known unless she was there or her brother told her. And in addition to having the testimony from his family and his friends, they also had Jose's own words in the letters that he wrote while in jail. After he was arrested, all of his letters and all of his phone calls were monitored. And it was in his letters that we got some insight into his mind and also got him admitting guilt. In one letter he wrote, and I quote, "My mistakes are my mistakes. I don't blame no one. But the thing that came in my life from the first time I sold my soul. I hope you understand it wasn't me that day. I remember everything, but I know it wasn't me. I couldn't do nothing about it because he was standing there watching me and Victor do our job the way he wanted it to be done. My life is fucked up. I know that I will come out of this situation I put myself in since day one." He again admitted what he did in writing, this time more directly when he wrote, quote, "I was sick-minded stabbing that hoe 60 times. It's all good. It's what the devil asked for." And when this letter was presented in court, when this particular part of the letter was read, the prosecutor got so pissed and screamed in Jose's face and was like, she was not a hoe. She was a little girl. And then this prosecutor proceeded to pantomime stabbing over and over with this screwdriver dozens of times just to show what this child endured at the hands of this monster. He told the court, this was a little girl. She was a daughter, a granddaughter, a niece, a friend, a 15-year-old child. The DA truly did seem to be very passionate about this case, and he just said that it was the fact that Corriann was so young and so purely good, and the fact that the kids who did this to her were so young and so purely evil really made him lose faith in humanity. So I don't remember if I mentioned this yet, but what the prosecution was going after specifically was capital murder. And in order for them to get that conviction, they would have to prove that a murder was committed at the same time that another felony was being committed, like kidnapping or sexual assault. Now, the prosecution thought they had this in the bag because they thought that Jose's own confession, where he says that he clotheslined her and stopped her from running away, admitted that she was kidnapped. Or admitted? No. Suggested? Proved that she was kidnapped, and the fact that she had bit down on him during the sexual act proved a sexual assault. But the defense said that there was not enough evidence to prove that a sexual assault took place while Corriann was alive, though they did admit that they did do things to her body after she was dead, which is just too fucked up to even think about. But they also said that them stopping Corriann from leaving was not enough to prove that she was kidnapped. They just believed that the prosecution was overreaching, and they said that the evidence that they had proved that yes, a murder was committed, but not a capital murder. And Jose's attorney even said of this, quote, "Just because you find from the evidence that this was a murder, not a capital murder, does not lessen the justice for Corriann. These are important legal decisions that you have to make." But, despite that riveting take that the defense attorney gave, they didn't call a single witness to testify on Jose's behalf. Okay. And I have to imagine that's because there wasn't anybody who could have said anything that would have made the situation any better. Because what Jose did was sadistic. It was inhumane. And in his own words, he didn't regret it because it was all good and what the devil asked for. During the closing argument, the prosecution said that basically they didn't know if the devil had anything to do with what happened to Corriann, but knew that anyone who believed in God would recognize that he was nowhere near, or they were nowhere near that apartment the day that Corriann was killed. Okay? And so that the only thing that mattered here was that in this courtroom, good overcame evil. After 4 days of Corriann's family having to experience what I can only imagine as hell on earth, from having to listen to the testimony and having to see the crime scene photos, which all of it was so difficult on them, dude. It got so bad. There were points where like Corriann's father would just sit there and shake, and his mother was sitting beside him and would have to like try to help center him. It got so bad that there were parts and times where like the family would have to actually leave the courtroom because they couldn't handle hearing and seeing what they were seeing. And not just when it came to the case, but even looking at Jose sitting there in court having no emotional reaction, except or sometimes he would smile during his trial. It was just so bad. And a friend named Jennifer said of this, and I quote, "To believe that that kind of evil exists in this world, in this day and age is just, how can somebody do that to another human being?" And that's the question that we still don't have an answer to. How could somebody do that? How could somebody do that and not care and actually go on to think it was funny? So with that, the jury was sent to deliberate, and after just over an hour, they had come back with their decision. They had found Jose Reyes guilty of the capital murder of Corriann Cervantes. And when this verdict was read, he had no reaction. And this was something that was actually notable to the DA. And he said, quote, "You always hope that there's humility in somebody. I'm starting to understand after 25 years of doing this, there's not. And it's not me to judge. It's just my job to hold them accountable and make sure that they don't hurt anybody else. I would hope that a future parole board will look at the brutal nature of the crime and come to the same conclusion that I have, that I hope he's never among us again." And bro, I feel the same way, because to this day, Jose has still not explained himself and has even backtracked off his original story. A decade after his arrest and conviction, Jose went on to give an interview. And when he did this interview, he said he was going to shock everybody, blow their fucking socks off, because he had a secret. He had been covering up for somebody else who committed this crime for all these years. He said it was somebody else who killed Corriann alongside of Victor, and that he was there and saw it all, but he hadn't said anything because he was such a good friend. He says that the person responsible was interviewed by police early on, but they moved past him too quickly and focused all their attention on Jose. He did admit to having sex with Corriann, but said that that was it. He had nothing to do with what happened to her, but he was there and he watched it happen for over an hour, but was too intoxicated to do anything to help, which we just know this is all such bullshit. He just sucks so bad. He is the worst. But anyways, let's get back on track here. I derailed a little bit. Let's go back to when he was found guilty. After the verdict was read, Corriann's aunt, who again, she was very close with, got on the stand and made a statement to her killer. And she was rightfully so angry, so upset. She had so much blame and rage for so many people. She blamed Jose's parents. She blamed the people in the neighboring apartments who heard and did nothing. And it was Jose, though, who got the brunt of her anger, rightfully so, who she read from her statements directly to, and she said in part to him, and I quote, "Jose Reyes, you are more dead than anybody else in this room." She added that he was morally and spiritually dead, and she made sure that he looked at a large photo with Corriann's bright smile on a poster board that her family had brought and set up in the front of the courtroom. And she added, quote, "Corriann is alive. She is one of the sweetest, kindest girls I have ever known and one of the brightest lights in our family." And then she just said that she believes Corriann is in heaven and that Jose will end up in hell. Ultimately, Jose Reyes was sentenced to life in prison because due to his age, he was not eligible for the death penalty. And do you think he deserved the death penalty? You'll have to let me know down below, because I know there will be some strong feelings about this. But due to his age, he wasn't able to even have that as an option. Corrian's father said that Jose Reyes has no compassion, no feelings, and that he got exactly what he deserved. And then he said that he and his family would be back the following year to make sure that Victor got exactly what he deserved too. Because due to these men, Corriann no longer had a voice, so they would be there to be her voice. Now with that, let's get on to what happened with Victor. Now, Victor's trial really didn't seem to get the same amount of coverage that Jose's did, and I think that's for a multitude of different reasons. But the main one that I think is that it did seem that overall Jose was like the mastermind. Even the police said that they believed that he was the one driving this ship, but that didn't mean that Victor was any less culpable. He still clearly participated in the murder, and according to Jose, that was so that he, Victor, could sell his soul to the devil. Jose said he had already done this, and that he had told Victor that if he killed Corriann, that Victor could do the same, and that was why they did what they did. Months after Jose went to trial, the following June, Victor went to trial, and his went pretty much exactly like Jose's did. And after just 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury had come back with their verdict, and they had found Victor guilty of the capital murder of Corriann Cervantes. Just like Jose, he too was sentenced to life in prison, and he will be eligible for parole after 40 years. I don't know if I mentioned this I don't think I did mention this when I was talking about Jose. Both of them were given life in prison with possibility of parole after 40 years, which means their first time they will become eligible for parole will be in 2054. Corriann's family seems to have different feelings when it comes to their response to the boys getting these life sentences. Corriann's father has said with both of them being behind bars, he feels like he actually has gotten justice for his daughter. He feels like she can finally rest at peace, and that's really all they could aim for. From the beginning, her family just wanted to get justice for Corriann and to get these guys off the street because they recognized that this wasn't a personal attack on Corriann. If it hadn't been her, it would have been somebody else because these boys just wanted to kill someone. And a big takeaway for them was that kids just need to be careful who they trust, because Corriann trusted these guys. She knew these guys. She liked these guys, and she would have never thought they would have ever done anything like this to her. But where her father sees justice in this case, her aunt does not. Her aunt does not see life sentences as justice. She says for her, justice would be doing to them exactly what they did to her niece. She said she thought about it and played it out in her head for years, but finally got to a place where she had to try to let go of all of that anger and not hold on to it, not hold it on inside of her and let it fester inside of her. But that does seem to be something that's easier said than done, because what happened to Corriann changed this family fundamentally. Because of what happened to Corriann, other kids in her family were just simply raised differently. Her aunt that she was so incredibly close with said that her children, after what happened to Corriann, all of her kids were just much more sheltered. She was paranoid and overprotective and needed to know where her kids were at all times. And her kids, as a reaction to what happened to Corriann, are more cautious and more scared and more careful when it comes to the people they come in contact with, because they know that they just can't blindly trust everyone they know. Which, to not be able to trust your friends is such a horrifying thing for kids to have to learn at such a young age. I can't even imagine that. To go through something like that and then to have to live through the trials, it seems like something that I truly can't even understand. I can't understand how difficult that would be, how emotionally taxing that would be. And after all was said and done, Corriann's father said that he just wanted to take the opportunity to try to heal. Now, it's the type of thing that I imagine they all desperately need, but something that won't happen overnight. And they had planned, at least then, and I don't know how they're doing now, but their plan was to take it day by day and to hopefully get to a place where they just felt some sort of peace. And I truly hope that they've been able to get just that, some sense of peace. And with that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Corriann Cervantes. I hope that you found it to be informative. I hope I gave you every bit of information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I just want to thank you for hanging out and remembering Corriann with me today. Now, considering everything I told you throughout this video, I'd like to now revisit the question of the day, and that was this. Do you believe that Jose and Victor truly believed that they were selling their souls to the devil when they murdered Corriann? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a comment down below with whatever case you'd like to see me cover in the future. As you may know, I have a long list of cases, and whenever you leave me a suggestion, I put it on my list with your name next to it, so if I cover it, I can give you a shout out. I love looking into the cases you guys suggest because they're often cases I haven't heard of or cases that need more coverage, and I know you're filled with great ideas and great taste, otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out new videos every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my membership and a link to my merch store. If you don't already know, now you know that what you're listening to, what you're watching right now, is also a podcast. You can search True Crime with Bratterstein wherever you listen to podcasts, and if you could follow, leave a rating, do whatever one must do to engage with said podcast to help push me into the algorithm, I would very much appreciate that. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I just want to thank you for being here. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. But that is tight. You are tight. I hope to see you in my next video, and in the meantime, take care of yourself.